Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Nice to see so many familiar faces out there in the audience. Tonight I'm going to give you a little bit of an update, some of the highlights of our recent work that's been going on at Abydos. We worked this last year actually during two short seasons over the winter holidays between semesters, between December and January 2012 and 13. And then again, we returned to Abydos in the early summer after the end of the spring semester for about a 5 or 6 week season, which was May and June 2013. I'm mostly going to concentrate on the summer work because we have some really interesting finds. I'd like to share with you some of the highlights of what we've been working on. Before I do that, I would like to just say a few words of thanks to some of the people who have really made the work at Abydos possible in recent years. One person in particular is Amanda Mitchell-Boyask. She's really helped tremendously, making possible a lot of the continued work of this institution in the field in Egypt. I'm incredibly indebted to Rick Rockwell for his continued interest and support, and also Jean Walker for her interest and support in meeting a lot of the institutional costs that are associated with the field work in Egypt. All right, so let's get underway here. I apologize, the slides do seem to be a little fuzzy. They're crystal clear on the computer screen, but for whatever reason, not so clear up here. Maybe if we turn the lights down on the screen. It does still seem to be a little blurry, but hopefully you all can live with that. Let me just introduce our field team. We had a small group out during the summer, in May and June 2013. There's myself on the left. Some of you may actually recognize or know some of these people. Next to me, wearing the purple shirt, is Paul Verhelst. He's actually sitting in the back there. He's a graduate student in Egyptology. He's taken a real shine to this museum. He seems to be involved in virtually every activity that goes on here, including serving as a counselor for the summer camp, where he was very popular with the kids, including my son Alexander, who's over there. He's always asking, "What's Paul up to? Daddy, did you give Paul a failing grade on his exam? You should really flunk Paul." Anyway, that's Paul. In the middle, wearing the green shirt, is another Egyptology graduate student, Shelby Justel. She's also in the back there. Some of you may know her. And then the taller fellow is Kevin Cahill. He's an advanced PhD student. I'll be talking a little bit about some of his research as well. And then his wife, Jessica Cahill. So we had a small group. A very devoted group. They did wonderful work. One of my favorite teams of all time, I have to say. And they adapted wonderfully to the terrible commute that we had from the dig house to the site every morning at 5 a.m., boarding these camels, this character here, who would take us to the dig site. This is not actually how it happened. We had a car, but from time to time, we did avail of ourselves of the local transportation, this lovely camel that resided next to the site. There you see Paul and Shelby on one of their periodic trips on camelback around South Abydos. Of course, South Abydos is a little bit of a remote location. There's not much in the way of malls or shopping or restaurants of any form, so no McDonald's. So you have to import McDonald's. Thanks to our dig house staff, our Egyptian staff, they love to create these kinds of themed events, and this year they came up with the idea of having a McDonald's in the dig house. So there you see the sign they made, and it was quite amazing. They recreated a McDonald's meal almost perfectly. I couldn't really tell the difference. You had a choice of a hamburger or a fish fillet sandwich, exactly the same little French fries that you get at McDonald's. I don't know if Paul and Shelby will agree. It was quite a perfect rendition. You went up and ordered from the McDonald's staff of Abydos. To turn to the site, just to look at it very briefly, I don't have time to go into a lot of details of it, but really for the last over 15 years, we've been excavating a part of Abydos, which is located to the south of the main core. Abydos, of course, is a place with many millennia of history going back into the pre-dynastic period of Egypt. It has its origins as far back as about 4000 BC. It became a cult place, a religious center in most of the dynastic or historical periods. And one period that was very important for the cult of Abydos, the function of the site as a cult center was the Middle Kingdom, which is what we're researching. During this time, the god Osiris was very prominent. He's the primary deity venerated at Abydos, and many of the structures there relate to the cult of Osiris in one form or another. We've been working at this area called South Abydos. It's largely an area bounded on the one side, as you see, by the floodplain of the Nile Valley, and then on the other side by the high desert cliffs, which this photograph is taken from the base of that, looking out across this expanse. In the sands of South Abydos are concealed beautifully preserved remains from 4,000 years ago, from the height of Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Part of this is this extensive mortuary complex that's focused on a large royal tomb. You see the location of the entrance to it here, which we've now covered with a protective building. And that served as the focal point for actually a large and expansive complex where there was a mortuary temple associated with the veneration of Senwosret III, who is one of the kings of Egypt's 12th dynasty, a large urban site, a town site near there that housed the population involved in his cult. The site has a lot of other things going on, though, as well. One of the things we're trying to do is basically look at the combination of royal activity and private activity, looking at various structures up here, like the royal tomb and things around it, trying to understand what's going on there, and then understand the site from sort of the private perspective, the population that lived there, how do they relate to this. So those are some of the things we're investigating. Something we've done over the last 2 years, which was a major undertaking with funds from the American Research Center in Egypt. We covered the entrance to the major kind of focal point of this complex is a gigantic underground tomb. It's about 800 feet long, cut down into the bedrock below the desert cliffs you see there, but it never had a superstructure, and so over millennia it was covered over by desert sand. We've stripped away the sand from the bedrock and fitted this protective building on top of the tomb, which has allowed us to initiate a major program of excavation of this tomb. It's a really fascinating structure that is essentially kind of transitional between the early Egyptian tradition of the pyramids and the later familiar form that you get by the time of Egypt's New Kingdom, the hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings that many of you know. This tomb has elements that sort of bridge those two traditions, so it's kind of a sort of a missing link, an architectural kind of transition between those two traditions. It sits at the base of a cliff formation that you see there, which we've identified the name of, which is Anubis Mountain. And there you see, actually, it's a little indistinct, sorry, on the top of the building, on the face of it, we've discovered a series of stamp seals, administrative stamps that have in hieroglyphs the name of this place. And it served as a kind of a necropolis seal, so we've adapted that onto the top, actually, of the building. And there you see some of the work going on in that. So over the last several years, we've been working on the interior of this great tomb of Senwosret III. A lot of questions about how it was used and the tomb robbery process. And so far we've excavated, as of this last season, up to essentially kind of halfway into the interior. We are at a point, actually, where we can begin the excavation of what, to my mind, is the most interesting part of it, which is this inner part of the tomb, which begins with the burial chamber of the king, and then continues with 2 additional chambers. These seem to be the actual burial compartments of Senwosret III, so we're kind of making our way inwards into the tomb in that way. It's a pretty big undertaking because of the volume of material. It is a tomb that was damaged quite viciously by ancient tomb robbers in the process of locating the royal burial chamber and plundering it. They ripped apart a lot of this beautiful masonry that you see here. They're huge chambers. This is 100 feet below ground in the bedrock. Chambers lined with various types of stone, like this beautiful limestone, but also the wreckage of the tomb robbery process. And it's been, to the point we've got to, it's been quite a process. I mean, most of these chambers originally were full all the way to the ceiling, and we've been removing it, big blocks to contend with. If you can, I don't know if you guys' eyes are quite good enough, but especially because the slide's a little indistinct. That fellow there in the middle, you might just notice he's wearing a David Beckham t-shirt. It's not quite clear, or as clear as it might be. These are some of the workers, my favorite guys that are contending with the major work underground. But a lot of what we're doing is also looking above ground at the surface structures. There's a lot of interconnections between the surface elements. There's a number of structures surrounding the tomb enclosure of Senwosret III, trying to understand what's going on there in terms of royal activity. But we're also interested in the private sphere, and one of the major questions we've had is we have a major town site, a huge urban center that probably housed 1,000 or 2,000 people in terms of population over a period of close to 250 or 300 years. And so far, we haven't really located any core private cemeteries for this population that lived and worked at South Abydos. So we've instituted a major kind of regional survey looking for the private cemeteries, and we did a lot of work on that this summer. Kevin Cahill, who I mentioned, is involved in this as part of his dissertation research for Near Eastern languages and civilizations, and we found a lot of really interesting stuff, and it's beginning to put together a picture of sort of the changing uses of the landscape from the private perspective. One thing we were looking at was the distribution and dates of different tombs in the vicinity of the royal tomb at South Abydos at the base of the cliffs. There again are Paul and Shelby working on the EDM, laying in some of our initial excavation units this summer. And we had some really kind of exciting finds initially. I'll show you this area up near the tomb of Senwosret III. A series of later tombs. These are private tombs that probably date somewhere in the vicinity from the late New Kingdom. So this is roughly from about 1000 BC onwards, probably into what's called the Third Intermediate Period, as far as we can tell. Beautifully preserved tombs right near the surface. These are actually mud brick structures, a series of passage tombs that have passageways and stairways descending to a burial chamber. And here you see one of them. They actually originally had a series of vaulted chambers, each descending to the final chamber, which is the lowest down, and that is the burial chamber. You see that under excavation. The innermost chamber of these, there's a series of about half a dozen of them that we examined, trying to gain a sense of it. They terminate in these beautifully lined, stone-lined chambers, so that's the actual burial chamber. But these tombs were very badly plundered. Just shreds, bits and pieces, the smallest amount of tiny things that indicate the date and the status. But we did find fragments of cartonnage coffins with gilding. So these are high-status burials of a slightly later period than our primary interest in the Middle Kingdom. They actually had very, very careful techniques to prevent tomb robbers from entering into the burial chamber, but because they had brick vaults, the tomb robbers simply punctured through from above, and in some cases the arched doorways and big sections of the vaults are still intact. So just some views of those tombs with the excavation process underway. As we were excavating these later tombs, close to the tomb of Senwosret III, we had an absolutely kind of a surprising discovery, something we weren't really looking for. There is another tomb there, constructed originally very much like these other ones, like the ones I just showed you, with a series of a brick entrance shaft, a passageway, and a vaulted burial chamber. In the process of excavating this one, however, we realized that it has a stone chamber, and here you see parts of the brick structure in the foreground, and actually just a slight vestige of what was originally a brick vault that covered this thing. We were astounded to uncover what was not actually part of a private tomb at all, but actually a royal sarcophagus chamber. Here you see the top of it just exposed. Someone at some point had made use of a plundered and destroyed royal tomb at this location. This does not belong to Senwosret III's tomb. It's somebody else entirely. When we saw this and we saw the profile at the top of it, we immediately realized what it was. This is a royal sarcophagus chamber of a distinctive type, which is characteristic of Egypt's late Middle Kingdom. It comes into vogue in the very end of the 12th dynasty. It's a type of chamber chamber that was designed to protect and guard the royal burial. It's just a monolithic block within which the actual burial would be located, and a huge lid would be lowered down onto the top of it. So we were really surprised to find this thing here. Someone had adapted it for their own tomb. Here it is in the process of excavation. We first excavated out the interior of it, and you can see there's actually a central rectangular recess, which is for to house the actual burial. The coffin of the king would be located there, and a smaller receptacle, which is actually the foot end. The king's head would be the far side, the feet would be towards you, and at his feet would be the canopic chest containing the inner organs, both of them built into this single block. So we came down on the base of it. We thought we had kind of reached the end, but then we started going down on the outside, and we realized this was just a monstrous block. We kept going down and down and down. It got wider and wider and wider. As we went down, the guys were getting a little frustrated because the sand on the sides of the bulks didn't hold up, and it kept falling in. So every bucket that went out, 2 more buckets fell in, but eventually we peeled it all back far enough to reveal the thing. Again, it's a little bit out of focus, I'm sorry, but it's a huge block. It's about 60 tons in weight. The base of it actually goes down over 3 feet below the base of the receptacle. So the total height of it's about 8 feet, 16 feet long. And it's made out of this distinctive kind of reddish-purple quartzite. There you see just another view of it emerging from the sand. And we determined very quickly that the origin of this royal sarcophagus chamber, but because of the size of it, is obviously very close by. This was not pulled very far out of its original location. In fact, it actually seems to have been rolled because the edges have been sort of rounded off. We know for certain it originated in one of 2 what are usually identified as subsidiary mastabas. These are actually royal tombs which are tremendously interesting because they are undoubtedly kings that come after Senwosret III who chose to locate their own burials at the site. So here we have now discovered this monstrous sarcophagus chamber. Originated here where the red dot is, and it ended up where the blue dot is. We're not sure exactly how, but at some point the original tomb it was inside was destroyed. A fascinating aspect of it is that the stone that it's made out of, quartzite, this distinctive coloration and grain that it has, Kevin Cahill has examined it. There are 2 places you can get quartzite in Egypt, down at the first cataract near Aswan, or up near Cairo. There's a place called Jebel Ahmar, means the Red Mountain. There's not much of a mountain left there anymore because suburbs of Cairo have almost swallowed up the Jebel Ahmar, but there it is from Google Earth. And this particular sarcophagus chamber was quarried up here in northern Egypt. It was brought a journey of about 400 miles to southern Egypt, to Abydos. It's a huge investment in the construction of this particular tomb. Who built this tomb? That's one of the major questions. And what we know is that this tomb and another one near it that we've also been working on are virtually identical to a tomb of the very early 13th dynasty belonging to a king known as Amenemhat. He's a very obscure figure. He dates just a few reigns into the beginning of the 13th dynasty, after the close of the 12th dynasty, to which Senwosret III belonged. So together, these are all part of what we call the late Middle Kingdom. Amenemhat's tomb is almost identical. He has a pyramid at a site called Dashur up near Memphis. The interior compartments of this are almost identical. There you see the same kind of monolithic chamber with the receptacles for the sarcophagus and the canopic chest. Here you see just a chronology of the Middle Kingdom, with Senwosret III highlighted here. The final 4 kings of the 12th dynasty include Senwosret III, who built this large tomb at Abydos, his successor, a long-lived king known as Amenemhat III, and then there are 2 very brief ruling kings who finalized out the 12th dynasty, Amenemhat IV, and then a female pharaoh, whose name is Sobek-Neferu. And so the date of Amenemhat actually falls about 1790 BC, the end of the 12th dynasty, the final reign of this female pharaoh Sobek-Neferu ended in about 1797. There's less than a decade between the construction of that tomb up in Dashur for Ameni Kemal and these last short reigns of the 12th dynasty. It is my theory that what we're looking at Abydos is the tombs of the last two kings of the 12th dynasty, King Amenemhat IV and Sobek-Neferu. Their tombs have never been found. They should look like these tombs look like at Abydos. So we'll be looking at this in the coming seasons, looking for clear evidence. As you can see, the sarcophagus chamber has no inscriptions. This is actually a chamber for what would have contained an inscribed coffin and other elements of the burial assemblage. Of course, when the excavations were done, it was fun to pretend that we were the king. So there you see our Guftis, our chief excavation foreman. This is Rayas Ibrahim. Almost everything that happens at Abydos happens because of this guy. He gets the men working. There he is discovering me in the sarcophagus. Of course, once I did it, everybody had to do it. There's Kevin being discovered. There's Paul. There's Shelby. We were all excavated out of the chamber. Then the Guftis did it too, so it got to be a lot of fun. Then we decided, well, how many people will fit in this damn thing? Turns out about 30 people can fit in this royal sarcophagus chamber. So anyways, it's a very exciting find. It's going to, hopefully this and other evidence that we discover in coming seasons will help to add new evidence to these final reigns of the 12th dynasty. The other area we were working on with funds from the University Research Foundation this summer is a continuation of our work in the town site, which I'll just look at very quickly here. We've been excavating at the back of the town site. One of the major structures we've found is this large mayoral residence, which we've completed the excavation of, but behind it is the remains of what was the kind of major administrative facility. This was kind of the control building for materials and communications that went in and out of this institutional building, the mayor's house. And this last summer we excavated, there you see an isometric reconstruction of it behind the building, because we knew that there were beautiful stratified deposits containing a lot of pottery and especially seal impressions. So there you see this work going on. Paul and Shelby were primarily involved in this work. It was a little tedious. We excavated in 1x1 squares going down. You see the material here. It's nicely stratified. There you see the final cutting as it looked. It sampled just part of this area. There's a lot more still to examine. But the important aspect of this is the clay seal impressions. Over about 4 weeks of excavation, we retrieved over 2,000 clay ceilings. This is largely the result of the efforts of our screen boys, who were given a little bit of incentive in the form of bakshish, a little extra payment for the retrieval of each ceiling, a £0.25 per ceiling. It does add up over time if you find lots and lots of them. So we pulled in about 2,000 fragments that look like this. This gives you a sense of it, a full range of different types of clay ceilings, most of them impressions of scarabs, many with sort of decorative motifs like spirals and scrolls, but an awful lot, huge numbers, have hieroglyphic texts with names and titles of people. And one of the things we were doing this summer was applying new techniques actually to the recording of these ceilings. They're very difficult to work with because they're typically about half an inch to an inch at most, very small with a lot of details in the hieroglyphs. So we've been recording them with a photographic technique called reflectance transformation imaging. I actually loaded some of it on the computer here for Gretchen, if Gretchen's here. Okay, I don't know if I'll have time to show it during the talk because I'll need to wrap up quickly here, but if you want to look at them after Gretchen, I'll show you. It allows you to essentially, it creates an image of the object, whatever it is, a mathematical model, in fact, that can be manipulated, and lighting can be moved around. And it's been very useful in documenting these particular types of objects. It's so useful, in fact, that we're now doing everything, all of our photography object photography is reflectance transformation imaging. We've given up on traditional photography. I'll just finish up here with just a quick look at one of the other areas we were working also in trying to look at for evidence for the private cemeteries, private tombs. We have another cemetery down here near the edge of the alluvial plain, the cultivation, as you can see, quite close to the houses here. Adjacent to the temple, we call it the Temple Cemetery. It's right next to the mortuary temple of Senwosret III. We've excavated about a dozen structures down there. Most of them are to be dated to the New Kingdom, and a series of them are quite large and ostentatious, including this tomb, which I'll just finish up with some views of. This was actually originally a pyramid tomb. It has the remains of a pyramid base, and once upon a time there would have been a tall, steep-sided pyramid of the form that developed in the New Kingdom, and then attached to it a series of vaulted chambers, which were robbed. They were punctured through, like the other ones I was talking about from above, but beautiful objects in this particular one, including the sarcophagus of the owner. It is a tomb that has, the sarcophagus is inscribed. It belonged to a man named Horemheb. He's not the famous king, if any of you are familiar with Horemheb from the 18th dynasty, but he's a contemporary of that king named Horemheb. It dates to the very end of the 18th dynasty. We found his sarcophagus. It's a sandstone sarcophagus, still in situ in the burial chamber. We removed it towards the end of the season. This was a real fun thing to do. It was hauled out. It was basically wrapped in a net and pulled up, and then we put it on top of this carrying platform, and then it was carried down where we could put it on to a pickup truck and take it back to the house. Just some views of it, beautifully carved with the title of this man, Horemheb. He's a scribe. It just tells us he's a scribe, nothing more, and a series of religious texts associated with him. Some other objects from the tomb are incredibly beautiful. Some of you might have actually seen this exhibit up in the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Connecting Cultures. If you walk into this exhibit, the front of it, welcoming you, is a giant eye, an Egyptian glass eye. And from this tomb of Horemheb, we actually found a number of the identical same eyes that will greet you in the Brooklyn exhibit. One of the features of this tomb is beautiful glasswork, including these inlaid eyes that once belonged to the coffin, probably of Horemheb, and other members of his family. So there's a complete one and a fragmentary one. And a series of really kind of lavish objects. This was a very high-status burial. Beautiful things that had been passed over by tomb robbers, many shabtis, is just one example. And this lovely, intriguing object here, it's a red jasper head that fits into, we didn't know this at first, but these two things were originally separate, it fits into a carved steatite headdress. And we never would have thought this, but at the same time that we discovered this, out of the same area was this heart amulet with a little, inscribed on its surface, a phoenix. And lo and behold, all of these objects actually belong together, these three elements, this head and this heart amulet. They are known from a number of examples. This one in the British Museum, this one's in Stockholm in the Medelhavsmuseet. The same thing that we see here. This head actually fits on top of this heart amulet, and it's a specific type of amulet that's known from the Book of the Dead that is supposed to be made out of jasper, and it's used for making one become a phoenix in the afterlife. And my final slide, we didn't actually finish this particular tomb. The work is always continuing. The last day of work, we discovered, lo and behold, connecting the burial chamber of Horemheb, there's another chamber next to it. We didn't realize this until the last day. We had actually done magnetic mapping here, and once we realized there's another chamber, we looked at the magnetometry map, and we realized, okay, there's another chamber. We found the doorway that connects the two, and here you see the base of it, stamped with seals. These are stamped seals over a doorway that was plastered and stamped in order to seal it. So next time we return, we'll be continuing to work in that area. So thank you all. This gives you a little bit of feel for some of the highlights of our last season. I'd be happy to take a few questions if we have a moment or two.